You could probably watch 100 years of college football and not see a set of circumstances presented to a team, the likes of which Ed Orgeron and LSU are dealing with right now. Talked about how it's very convenient that we just started adding a Tuesday show today. Well, here's how it's convenient. When we last spoke, Jamar Chase was the headliner. That's what we were talking about. Jamar Chase is opting out at LSU, and that brings the magic number of guys who were on the 2019 roster who will not be on the 2020 roster to 32. Well, now, 48 hours later, we're up to 34. Just keeps on climbing. And now it's Tyler Shelvin yesterday. Another guy who is projected by some to be a first rounder. I know some people debate that. At the very least, a high-impact future Sunday player. Another one has opted out at LSU. The magic number, as I said, is now 34. You lose two more surefire starters here. So where are we at? Well, Ed Orgeron spoke with the media today. And he said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Well, he didn't say that. That was his attitude. What he said was, yeah, there are a couple of more of them that are talking about opting out, and I hope they don't. But it may not be over, is the point. Now, there are some names being thrown around. There's probably a fair amount of skill at this point. I mean, look at the few left on LSU's roster that would benefit from opting out and looking ahead to the NFL. I mean, who down there at this point would even fit that description? There aren't many names, so there are a few names, but we'll see. Hopefully that's not something we end up talking about. But you've had the roster turnover, the likes of which you would normally have to add up 3 seasons to accumulate. LSU's dealt with it in one offseason. You've had off-field issues recently. Orgeron's had personal issues in his life that were pretty well chronicled early in this year that I don't really feel like getting into. And now this. Ed Orgeron's 2020 will be one of the best college football autobiographies that you'll ever read several years from now. I would recommend, in fact, that he writes one book about 2020 and another book about the rest of his life, the rest of his college football career, because that's how involved 2020 has been so far. I had an odds maker tell me, in comparing the LSU 2019 team to the LSU 2020 team, because that's really what you want to know, like how much have they dropped off? Well, not that a point spread is the end-all, be-all, but I had an odds maker tell me, hypothetical matchup, 2019 LSU versus what we have now after the Shelvin opt-out and the Chase opt-out. 2019 LSU favored by 3 touchdowns versus 2020 LSU. Do you understand how insane that is? Might I remind you, very rarely do odds makers assign more than 3 points of value for any one player, and that's an elite quarterback, somebody like that. 21 points, 3 touchdowns worth lost in on-field, any given Saturday value. Crazy stuff. I saw Shea Dixon over on the Go 24/7 site that probably had one of the boldest undertakings in the history of sports media, and that is attempting to put together the current LSU depth chart. It's a brave move, partly because you got a lot of moving pieces down there, and the other part is because it may be irrelevant in the next day, according to Ed Orgeron himself. I know it sounds kind of like I'm joking around about this. My approach here is the only other option is to cry. So let's not cry on air, and instead let's just shake our head and call it for what it is. But I want to tell you this on a very serious note. I know a lot's going wrong right now. LSU is probably not going to be a national championship team this year. But I want to tell you this. As great as 2019 was for LSU, that's in the past. And it's great to look at that thing in the trophy case. And it's great to watch that Clemson replay and that Georgia game replay. And that's all fun. That's all well and good. But if LSU is to win championships in the future, I can guarantee you, bet your last dollar on it, that man, Ed Orgeron, and the folks around that program will be talking about how 2020 paved the way for that title or those titles that they go on to win. Because infinitely more is going to be learned through the adversity they're going through right now than was ever learned last year. What went wrong last year? Conversely, what's gone right this year so far? And we haven't even kicked it off yet to start the season. So at least if you want to shine some ray of positivity on it, I would look at it like that. But I do want to reiterate my position. 2019, a lot of people still look back on it, and it's kind of the age-old question at this point, it seems. Was that a season or was that a shift? 2019, it could be, I think it was on a podcast, the Late Kick Extra podcast. I made a meteorological comparison to a closed cold core low, and those are these low-pressure systems Real fun, very unpredictable, and if you ever want snow in the South, it's probably your best bet. They form, and they're independent of everything else, and they bring their cold air. They bring their own cold air with them, so it can be 73 degrees one day, and then it's 7 inches of snow on the ground the next day. This happened back in 2009, I want to say, in Georgia. And the point was, once it moved through, it moved through. It wasn't like cold air set in for a week. This crazy storm system comes in, and it's 70 degrees one day, there's the storm. And next day, it's like 50 degrees again. Next day, it's 70 degrees. And you're saying, how did that happen? Well, it was just this totally independent atmospheric phenomena, and it comes in, and once it's gone, it's gone. Is that what 2019 is going to be for LSU? That's the big question. That's what everyone in the remains to be seen camp is waiting to see. Here's the other unfortunate aspect. The unfortunate aspect, I'm not delving into a whole lot of the off-the-field stuff right now because there's a lot going on everywhere, but I do want to say this. When you have guys opting out, and you have a guy like Jamar Chase opt out and Tyler Shelvin opt out, here's the unfortunate aspect that a lot of you have observed. The fringes get amplified today. It used to be that you had crazy people in your fan base, but, Twitter didn't exist. So you could kind of, you heard them at your barbecues and your cookouts and at restaurants and family reunions, like you heard them, but the entire world didn't hear them. Well, now someone with 37 followers on here and had a little egg for a profile on Twitter, all of a sudden they can call Jamar Chase whatever they want to, and that gets plastered all over Twitter and all over the internet, and 1,700 retweets later, everyone thinks, oh my goodness, look at what those LSU folks are saying to poor Jamar Chase. Well, that's a fringe, but the fringe is getting amplified. Well, here's the unfortunate aspect of that. Sometimes people don't know how to interpret that. And sometimes parent of a player or a player themselves or a recruit or even an opposing assistant coach who's recruiting against you could take that, put it in front of a future player and say, you see that? That's how they treat them there. That's how they treat players there. You're nothing to them if you can't play football. We all know that's not the actual case for a vast majority of fans there or anywhere, but just mind your P's and Q's. I'm preaching to the choir. I know 98% of you don't do this, but that is something to be cognizant of. Just saying.